It is our honor this morning to have with us Dr. Ahmad Shqeirat. Ahmad is the Imam at the Islamic Community Center of Tempe near the ASU campus and does great work in the wider world. Ahmad, welcome. Ahmad and I are going to have a dialogue. Have a seat. Thanks to those of you who sent questions. Ahmad has seen the questions beforehand, and I told him I might surprise him with a few questions that he spurs as he talks, and he's okay with that. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I may ask you to just pull this as close to you as you can get, or pull it off the stand so that we can hear you. If you could only tell a room full of non-Muslim Americans one thing about your faith, taking some time to explain that one thing, what would it be?
Oh, thank you very much. We Muslims believe all the heavenly messages of the Almighty came for one purpose. That purpose is to discipline the soul and the human, and to make us better humans to our families and to our societies. Yet in Islam, this disciplinary system is presented by focusing on the Almighty God. The focus point in Islam is the Almighty God, whom we believe to be the supreme being, one and unique, the creator. Everything else is part of his creation. So we look at ourselves as the servants and the slaves of the Almighty God, who created us for one purpose: to relate to the Almighty by turning our faces of worship to the Almighty alone. So beyond that, when you go to the details, the disciplinary system in Islam exists almost in everything: in the moral system, in the worship system, in the interpersonal relationship system, in the dietary system, in the doctrine system, and so on. So by giving the glory to the Almighty God and being conscious that the Almighty God is watching me, seeing me, hearing me all the time, that will discipline the human to be as humble as possible. And that will lead to switch my focus from what I like to what I should, according to the teaching of the Almighty. And I believe if we as humans succeeded in moving ourselves from what we desire and like only to what we should. An example: those who succeed in eating what they should, when they should, in the amount they should, I believe they have the healthy and good life. If I choose to eat what I like, when I like, the way I like, I believe I'll be putting my body into trouble. The same will be applied when we talk about behavior, interpersonal relationship, and whatever. So there is a disciplinary system in Islam that is presented in the doctrine. The Almighty God is one. You are the servant of God. God knows better than you. Have trust, confidence, and do your best to be humble and to obey the Almighty God.
I was with you until you got to the eating thing, and then Thank you. Oh, we're going to have a technical adjustment here. So, thank you, Ken. Another question that someone sent to me has to do with Sharia law. There's been some fear in America around Sharia law. I wondered if you could talk about that and how Islam handles the interplay between secular and Sharia law.
Oh, thank you very much. I believe this is a timely question, and for that sake, to give a few details, um, I chose the passage from our booklet. We have a booklet we produced in our Islamic Center that will introduce Islam to others. And we lately, because of what the Islamophobia advocates, I would say, chose to make a big chaos of this issue, the Islamic law. So I chose this passage. I'll try to read for you. The Islamic law, or the Sharia, lately became a means to the Islamic phobia advocates to create fear and hatred toward Islam and Muslims. This issue, in our view, is a political and media stunt more than religious. No Muslim ever has called for the replacement of the US Constitution with Sharia. Sharia is neither a constitution nor it is a law. It is actually against Sharia to impose the Sharia on anyone. Furthermore, Sharia only applies to Muslims, not to non-Muslims. We want you to be aware of the following points. Number one, Muslims believe the Sharia law, or the Islamic law theme, is to stand for the real good, the real common good for man and for the society. Actually, the word Sharia in Arabic means the path, and it was mentioned only once in the Quran. That is 600 pages. Was only mentioned once in chapter 45, verse number 18. Anyway, the Islamic law Sharia for Muslims is like the Torah law or the halakha for the Jews. Jews in America even operate Jewish court called Beth Din. Muslim Americans do not operate any such courts. Approximately 70% of the Islamic law deals with the rituals of worship, and 25% deal with dietary restrictions and personal, economic, and family laws, just like kosher laws for Jews. All of these laws are far from opposing the laws of the land. They are, in fact, protected by our US Constitution. The Quran has 6,246 verses. Only 30 of them talk about judicial system. Only 10 verses out of these 30 talk about punishment system. And we believe these 10 verses are there which talk about the punishment system, but we believe they are not the theme of the Quran. More than 4,000 verses of the Quran, more than half, include something to introduce the Almighty God to us, who God is and how you can get to know the Almighty God. It's true that some laws of the Sharia are intended for application at a national level and include punishments for murder and theft. The biblical law, an eye for an eye, is confirmed in Islam. These laws, however, are intended to be applied in a system of government that derives its rules from Islam. This part of the Islamic law depends on the judicial system due process in order to be applied. I would say this. History bears witness that non-Muslims under the Islamic law rule have enjoyed unprecedented freedom of religion. For example, the 7 centuries of Islamic rule in Spain, under which Muslims, Christians, and Jews had lived together in peace. The Jews also fled the Nazi persecution to the safety of Muslim countries such as Turkey, Syria, and North Africa. Now, briefly, the Sharia Islamic law teachings are: number one, moral behavior, personal cleanness, emphasis on preservation and nourishment of all life forms, including plants and animals, rituals and spirituality of prayers, fasting, charity, righteous conduct, good deeds, and the rights of parents, children, spouses, and neighbors. Interpersonal relations, like teaching to enhance human relations and to avoid breaking relationships, encourage mutual consultation in all affairs, a prohibition of bigotry and racism, and emphasizing kindness and hospitality toward others, especially the weak and the poor. Financial guidance, encouraging charity, rights of the poor, respect for workers, rejection of exploitation, and circulation of the wealth among all classes. Personal rules and laws regarding privacy, gender relations, marriage, divorce, and inheritance. Now, the criminal laws implemented many of the 10 commandments in the Bible. They are less than 2% of the Quranic verses that deal with the criminal law of Islam. The Prophet asked his judge in this field to make things easy on people and not to make them hard. In 30 seconds, I would like to conclude with this. Some of the major differences between the Islamic law and the Sharia law. Number one, the Islamic law is larger in concept. It includes worshiping God, fast, prayer, good morals. It's not limited to the legal or illegal aspect in modern laws. The law, as we understand it, is only a small part of it. So even the concept of lawful and prohibited is part of the Sharia law, but it is larger in concept than the modern law because it includes the concept of the life after. Like if you do wrong to others, even if you are not caught by the law enforcement, God is watching you and you'll be held accountable in front of God because of the connection between this life and the life after. So as you see, really, Islam has been in America for more than 100 years. And if you go to Utah and other states, you will find mosques were established in 1930s, in 1920s. Yet we did not come to hear about the threat of the Islamic law till in the recent years, and especially during the time of the election. And you can watch after the election, the issue will calm down as if there is no threat. When the election is approaching, the issue will accelerate by the right wing as if the threat is imminent and we have to do something. Yeah. So I think it's a political issue more than a religious issue.
So in conversations, you've told me a few stories about, about what it's like when it's heating up like it is now. The rhetoric around the killings in Paris devolved into calls to keep out Syrian refugees, which devolved into some people talking about Muslims being dangerous. Then the recent shooting in San Bernardino led to another anti-Muslim outburst. What's the atmosphere like for Muslims in America right now? And I wonder, especially in your particular community, what's it like right now?
Arizona in general, the Muslim community in Arizona did not take the big hit or backlash. In states like Florida, Tennessee, Oklahoma, and sometimes even Texas, the Muslim community and the Islamic centers are facing daily harassment, vandalizations, even attack. Yet, in our particular Islamic center, we received some considered minor compared to others, mainly calls of offensive language and expressing a negative attitude. And sometimes we had some few individuals standing in front of the center, choosing to bring copies of the Quran, put them in the ground, step on them, tearing them, and shouting. And seems also they create a website called bombislam.com. So they raised the sign in front of us, yelling on us, and so on. To put that in perspective, we have some concern. Some individuals have some fear. Some of them even started avoiding coming to the center these days. Others insist that we have armed security officers to be hired from the off-duty police department officers. My personal concern will go more to the Muslim ladies, those who practice, because of they observe the hijab or the head cover, so they will be easy targets. I personally, my wife, my 3 little kids were in a restaurant here somewhere in Chandler eating pizza when a guy came and said, "You worthy to be beheaded." And the good part of the story, another lady, not my wife said, "I was shocked, what does this guy say?" But another lady sitting there, who just an average American citizen, stood up screaming in the face of that guy who left, "Hey, are you crazy what you are saying?" And so we have some concern and some fear, but to be fair and to be balanced, I would say the positive, the support, and of the good friends, like Pastor Andy and this congregation, are tens of times of these negative individuals. We are aware that the negative individuals and the extremists are few and very tiny. Yet, unfortunately, we are in the time when if there is something horrible going to happen, does not need more than one dumb guy or ignorant person to create big mess and to disturb the life of thousands, even hundreds of thousands.
I hear people saying Muslims need to condemn the violence that's being committed in the name of Islam by some, but I've never been asked as a white male to condemn acts of terrorism committed by white American males from the Midwest. If I was asked to do this, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to me. How do you respond to the call for people of faith, people of Muslim faith, to condemn ISIS and other like groups?
I would say we share the same view, and we believe we have nothing to do with these guys. Every individual is held in front of the law according to his or her behavior. So the perpetrators or the wrong guys, whether they get arrested or get killed, they paid for their crime and justice being served. Yet, we repeatedly as Muslims do condemn, whether the media is asking or others or the people asking or not. And something notable, the media even is not picking up our condemnation. So it's not going anywhere. It's in our records, in our website, in our newsletter, in our speeches. Yet we like to do that because in the modern days, the internet and the online digital world, it seems, reach our kids before us and more than us, and influence and raise our children and young ones more than us. So we personally like to do that to immune them. Not for a guy because his name is Muhammad or Ahmad, or he was born in a Muslim country, or he says, "I'm representing God," or "I'm reading Quran," or "this is Islam," does not mean this person is right. Talk to your parents, talk to your local imam, talk to your local congregation members, and to verify. So we need to mute them, not to be cheated, not deceived by this propaganda online. Especially lately, we, not in Arizona, but in other states, I think we experienced 1 or 2 of the teenagers who try to travel to join ISIS. As our attitude, we understand, like ISIS connection with Islam is that the connection of KKK with Christianity. They claim something, but indeed it's here in their mind that is that made them extremist. And luckily they are tiny. The chaos they created is big, so we try to express ourselves as much as we can. So to let others know that not all Muslims have the same view, and to let our children know to distance themselves from these bad guys.
I have 2 more questions for you, and we're getting close to our time. Unitarian Universalist principles talk about calls for world peace and justice. I wonder if you could say just a little bit about what Islam has to say about war and peace and about justice.
We can talk a lot about this. One of the names of the Almighty God we believe is As-Salam. That is the source of peace. In our prayer we say, Allahumma anta as-salam wa minka as-salam. Our Lord, you are the source of peace. Peace comes from you and grant us peace. And when our Islamic greeting calls Assalamu alaikum, which means may the peace and the blessings of the Almighty God be upon you. When we conclude our prayer by saying Assalamu alaikum to the right and left, which means it's a prayer of peace. The same with the justice. And if you read the Quran, you'll find that the 100% rule does not have any exception in Islam is to stand firmly for justice. Many verses support this. I will read only for you one verse. That is from chapter 4, verse 135. The Almighty says, O you who believe, stand out firmly for justice as witnesses to God, even as against yourselves, or your parents, or your kin, and whether it be rich or poor, for God can best protect both. Follow not the lusts of your hearts, lest you swerve. And if you distort or decline to do justice, verily God is well acquainted with all you do. So this is a command for us to stand, to say the truth, and to stand for the just cause, even if we have to testify against ourselves or against our family members or our beloved one. God said the truth as a truth is more worthy of your testimony than the relationship. Even if the so beloved one stands on the wrong spot, you need to correct and you need to say what is just, not what the beloved ones like you to say. Yeah.
So deep commitment to peace. And
deep
justice.
Commitment to peace and to justice. Yeah.
Well, Imam Shqeirat has agreed to hang out for a while and answer your questions, meet you. He would love to meet you. But I have one last question for you, and this is the question that I'm asked most often by the folks in this congregation. What can a congregation like ours do to be helpful to you and your community in very tense times like these?
Well, thank you very much. I believe this is a great thing you did to give me the room to come and to, I would say, to clarify some issues as I could. I think with your social gathering, when you have the chance to speak to the media, when you come to relatives, whatever, you would come into a negative person, a person who has very tiny view. I hope and to stand for what you believe and to say no, Islam is not like this, not all Muslims like this. If we generalize, because one evil Muslim is doing bad, and we generalize by saying the religion is like this, all Muslims like this, is this exactly what the right-wing Muslims do. If there is a Christian guy, a guy happened to be Christian, did something, they will say, oh, the Bible is like this, Christianity is like this, Judaism is like this, all Jews are like this. If we fall into this trap, we are not serving but the evil. And we are not harming but ourselves, our humanity, and our society. So I hope most of those who carried out something or thought of something negative, bad against Muslims, they never had the chance to meet, to interact with a Muslim in their life. There is a guy vandalized a mosque in, I believe in Texas, and when he arrested and they questioned, he said, I know nothing about Islam except what I heard on Fox News. So please don't watch Fox News.
Dr. Shqeirat, I thank you so much, my friend, for being here. Yeah.